You know how sometimes when you out and about, you see something that looks familiar but also really different, and you think, wow, where did that come from? Well, that's what I thought when I saw the new Squally 1521 GMT. This watch is obviously inspired by vintage dive watches. The first was the military-issue type with no date function like the legendary Rolex 62 Mars, which usually featured a date function and a rotating bezel with either a minutes or a seconds track. Now, some early examples include the Blancpain 50 Fathoms and, of course, the very iconic Omega Seamaster 300. These watches were designed for recreational divers, the no-nonsense functionality of a military-issued watch and the legibility of a civilian watch. In the 1980s and 90s, a development by Doxa which featured a distinctive look with a large crown and a case back that screwed directly onto the case middle. This design allowed for greater water resistance and was particularly popular in the 1960s, however. It fell out of fashion during the quartz crisis of the 1970s and 80s, only to make a comeback in recent times. While the rotating bezel and lollipop seconds hand are inspired by military dive watches like the Rolex 62 Mars, the watch is powered by a modified ETA 28932 movement, which means it keeps accurate time and has a convenient date function. The case is made of stainless steel and measures 40 millimeters in diameter, making it a perfect size for most wrists. And the watch comes with either a leather strap or a stainless steel bracelet. Even the font of the dial is a vintage-inspired design that pays homage to the early days of dive watches. Today, they're reworn by everyone from adventurers to professionals to anyone who appreciates a stylish and functional wristwatch. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please consider subscribing to support us and check out our other content. We have a ton of dive watch related content coming up. Whether you prefer a classic or a modern take on the dive watch, there's a style out there for everyone. So go ahead and add a dive watch to your collection. This watch is a tribute to the classic 1960s dive watches, but it has a few unique touches that set it apart. For example, the bezel has a unique insert with a cream-colored ring around the edge, which is more scratch-resistant than traditional aluminum. Others are adding new features like a second time zone display or a chronograph function, and some are simply updating the classic dive watch with new colors and finishes, which gives it a vintage look that's different from the usual black or blue bezels you see on dive watches. The watch also has a domed crystal, which adds a touch of elegance and sophistication, and the case back has a screw-in design that provides additional protection against water damage. Brands like Doxa, Oris, and Zodiac have all re-released their own versions of the super compressor watches. There are many other brands out there experimenting with new designs and features, while still maintaining the core functionality and durability of a dive watch. We saw the rise of computer dive watches, which allowed divers to easily monitor multiple aspects of their dive, including depth, temperature, and time. There's a huge range of dive watches available from affordable models to ultra-luxurious ones. These new dive watches are pushing the boundaries of what a dive watch can be while still retaining the rugged functionality and stylish design that make them so popular. And today, many of them are even offered in both automatic and quartz versions. A great example of this is the Blancpain FF2, which could measure depths up to 400 meters. There are also stylish accessories that can complement any outfit. Whether you're going for a casual, sporty, or even a formal look, a dive watch can add a touch of sophistication and style to your wrist. Plus, with so many different styles and designs available, you're sure to find a dive watch that matches your personal taste and complements your wardrobe. You can see this influence in the Squally 1521 GMT with its lollipop seconds hand and the large indices filled with C3 lume. Who wanted a stylish yet functional watch that they could wear both in and out of the water? These watches were simple, reliable, and most importantly, legible. Well, as technology advanced, so did our expectations for dive watches. Take the Squally 1521 GMT for instance. This watch was inspired by 1960s dive watches, but it's not a direct copy of any particular model. Instead, it takes design cues from various vintage watches of that era and combines them into a cohesive and stylish whole. In the 1970s, we saw the introduction of the first quartz dive watches, which were more accurate, durable, and easier to maintain than mechanical watches. The biggest difference between a quartz dive watch and a mechanical one is that instead of having a mechanical movement powered by a wound spring, a quartz movement uses a battery-powered quartz crystal to keep time. This makes quartz watches more accurate, reliable, and easier to maintain. Legibility was key since divers couldn't just stop and look at their watch to tell the time. They needed to be able to quickly glance at their watch and immediately see the time. That's why these watches had large, easy-to-read dials with thick, long-lasting lume and high-contrast color schemes. But it's not a faithful re-release or a remake. It has its own identity and design language. But to understand why that is, we need to take a quick dive into the history of dive watches. Now, if you're like me, you love your wristwatch to be able to handle anything life can throw at it, which is why a tough, reliable, everyday capable watch has become my daily companion. Back in the day, there were two main types of mechanical dive watches. The other type of dive watch was the civilian watch. So far, so good. right? Now, an example of this was the legendary Genta-designed Blancpain FF1 from 1973, which combined the best of both worlds. But as the years went by, dive watches continued to evolve. And then in the 2000s, we saw the rise of the super compressor case design. This brings us to the present day, where dive watches are more popular than ever. The thing I love about dive watches is that they're not just functional pieces of equipment, but as we said earlier, over the past few years, we've been seeing some new takes on the traditional dive watch. For example, the large crown is reminiscent of the super compressor watches from the 1960s. Now, the result is a watch that looks like it belongs in a James Bond movie, but with a price tag that won't break the bank. Another example of a modern dive watch that breaks the mold is the Dan Henry 1963. Now, these are just two examples of modern dive watches that offer something a little different. Some brands are experimenting with new materials like ceramic for the bezel inserts, no matter what the approach. In conclusion, dive watches have come a long way since their early days as simple timekeepers for military and civilian divers alike. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.